Hi, I'm Nick Powell, City Hall Bureau Chief with City and State. Joining me today is Staten Island Borough President Jimmy Oddo. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Jimmy, you're taking over for James Molinaro, who had a pretty decent tenure here. How do you plan on changing kind of the vision of how to run the Staten Island Borough?
Well, I think there's a common theme when you represent an outer borough and the smallest borough, and that's you have to fight and scratch and claw for everything we get. And I'm going to try to utilize the relationships I've built up over 2 decades, including with Bill de Blasio, to deliver. It's you get a short transition period, and then you come here and you want to change the processes internally and put your management style, your stamp of your management style on the office. At the same time, you're trying to get caught up to speed on issues in the South Shore and the North Shore, which I didn't represent prior to this. And at the same time, trying to make, have outreach to people all across the island. And it is overwhelming, it really is. The first thing for me was to put the staff together and to get this place closer in my image. Jim had his style, I have mine. And that's frustrating, I have to tell you, to be able to go out there and make the changes, civil service titles and all of that, sort of inside baseball stuff, it's tough to wrestle with. But we're slowly staffing up, and 7 weeks in, I think this place runs closer to how I envision Borough Hall than previously. But it's an amazing experience every day. We're excited to get up, and we're trying to build Rome in a day. And I know that frustration, certainly with a couple of my borough presidential colleagues, I know they feel the same thing, that the pressure, the desire to do and make progress on multiple fronts simultaneously. And it's really amazing in that, I know there are people out there who scoff at the office, and I just say, I wish they could spend a week with me 24 hours a day and see all of the work that we put into this. And I know that rings true with the other 4 borough presidents.
Now, there's a perception, whether unfounded or not, that Staten Island is kind of the forgotten borough. Do you buy into that? And if so, how do you plan to kind of change that notion?
It's a tough thing to wrestle with, in that I don't want to use that as a crutch, and I don't want to have my constituents kind of throw up their hands and buy into, well, we will never get our fair share. I think historically, up until Rudy Giuliani, we absolutely were forgotten, and we absolutely were abused. I mean, at one point we were the sole repository, a depository for the city's garbage. And so historically, I think that's true. I think Rudy Giuliani changed it. I think to a lesser degree, Michael Bloomberg changed it. We are very different than the other 4 boroughs. We are closer to the rest of America than we are to the other 4 boroughs, and in the way our community is laid out, the way the lifestyle we have. But my job isn't to sort of look backwards, and I'm certainly not going to play the victim. I just want to be treated fairly. And what I've said to many commissioners, what I've said to the mayor is, I see myself as a partner with them. I'm not looking to be an adversary unless and until they push me to that point. My default position is always to work with people, and that frankly is a style that I had in the city council for 15 years. I was a Republican in a super minority in the council. I could have stood on sort of Republican principles and had conflict every day I was there. A lot of it I let pass by me, and I didn't swing at the pitch because I didn't think that was in the interest of my constituents. And I was a partner with the speaker, I was a partner with the majority, and I tried to find common ground. I had some pretty famous blow-ups with commissioners and with the mayor himself, because when it came to my core convictions and my core beliefs, I wasn't going to take a step backwards. But I see myself as a partner. I want to work in partnership. I had Commissioner Polly Trottenberg out here, and I've had some knockdown, drag-out fights with 2 of her predecessors, both of whom, particularly Iris, that I'm friends with today. My default position is to work with you. But if that doesn't work, if coming to the table doesn't work, I'm not it's in my DNA to kick you in the shins and places north of there, if that's what it takes to deliver for my community. So I think my reputation is that, my hand is extended. I could be your best friend, or I could be your worst enemy. And I've learned at the knees from some politically astute people, and I know how to throw a sharp elbow when needed. I think our job is to do everything. We should have everything in the toolbox. But I think you lead with, hey, come on, let's work together. I think we're in a generation of young or new electeds that it's sort of like the Twitter or social media where people are falling over themselves to be the first one to point to the problem or to bash. I was raised in this business that you do your work behind closed doors, you try to get consensus, you try to get something achieved for your community. And if that doesn't work, and then you go underneath the ring, you get the metal chair, and But so I'm not changing my approach. I'm going to work with this administration, and when I disagree with them, I will disagree with them. I will do it privately at first, but if it takes going public, I have no hesitation in doing that as well.
You mentioned going around to different part of the boroughs and getting to know areas outside of your council district. As you've been doing that, what are some issues that have popped up that maybe weren't on your radar before?
Staten Island I think people off of Staten Island have the sense that this is a real homogeneous community, and from the tip of Tottenville to Mariners Harbor, essentially it's the same, and it's not. It's different in certain ways. Much of my old council district and much of Councilmember Vinnie Ignizio's district wants to remain a bedroom community. Many parts of the North Shore are bedroom communities. But we have this waterfront, and right outside these windows where we're sitting, there will be $1 billion in private investment. And we have been waiting for a very long time and hoping that our waterfront will be revitalized and that St. George and portions of the North Shore will become what many communities in Brooklyn and some communities in Jersey have become. And we've been waiting for the first domino to fall. And one of the most exciting things about the last 7 weeks is bringing in the folks who are pushing these projects, the Rich Marin and the Wheel, BFC and the outlets, the folks at Triangle who are building this project, Iron State, Dave Barry. This is a wonderful opportunity to bring in the type of development that will revitalize this community, bring in the type of development that we could create a critical mass of young people, the type of development that could help us redefine Staten Island to parts, on the other side of the bays. And I mean, it's one of the most exciting things. You will see in the next year construction all along this waterfront, and the wonderful thing is that's not the end of it. That's just the beginning of it. And we have a stretch, a corridor all along Richmond Terrace that can be revitalized. There's no reason why we shouldn't be as good or if not better than Hoboken and Jersey City and parts of Brooklyn. Our proximity to Manhattan, the ferry as a viable mass transit option. So it's like a big puzzle, and if you could get those first pieces together, suddenly all the other pieces start to fit. And I dare say that a decade from now or 20 years from now, this corridor along the North Shore will look nothing like it looks today, and I think that will be great for Staten Island.
Now, you're talking about building on the waterfront. Superstorm Sandy obviously was a devastating natural event that kind of forced us to rethink how we build on the waterfront. As you've talked about developing along the waterfront more, how do you reconcile that with concerns about potential future storms of that nature?
Two points to that. I think the real damage in Sandy came to homes that were substandard, that were grandfathered in, that weren't ready for that wave. You can build in certain locations, whether it's residential or commercial, and build to withstand, environmental onslaught, if you will. And that's what these developments have already incorporated. So you kind of parse out the new development from the residential side, let's say on the east shore of Staten Island. There, the proper steps, in my estimation, are the ones that the governor is taking taking some property that we developed and saying no more. We're going to cede this back to Mother Nature. And the governor has led on the buyouts in Oakwood Beach, in Ocean Breeze. We'll probably have 1 or 2 more buyouts, but not large swaths of property. The second thing is something that we've been pushing, we being Councilman Vinny Ignizio and I, since we came back from our trip to New Orleans last February, and that is acquisition for redevelopment. Let the government buy this property, but not to keep it as open space as the buyouts are through the governor's program, but to buy the property, take a step back, and plan, put in the proper infrastructure, and then redevelop a different housing stock. That in combination with the Army Corps' plan of a seawall will lead to safe, more vibrant communities. It's something that the folks in New Orleans did through the Louisiana Land Trust. As soon as Vinny Ignizio and I heard about it, we've been advocating for it. And frankly, had the Bloomberg administration embraced it in a full-throated, comprehensive manner, 12 months later, I think we would be in a very different place. This week we had Mayor de Blasio here at Borough Hall at a private meeting, and then some of my colleagues met with him here at Borough Hall. And I preached to him that it's not too late to incorporate acquisition for redevelopment, because to me, that's how we transform these communities. That's how we transform lives. We give these folks a better housing stock and a better place to live. And I just use as a quick example what Jerry Romsky, the developer out in Queens, did with Auburn by the Sea. He basically had a blank slate. He literally raised the grade, put all new infrastructure in, and then built a very resilient, very sustainable housing stock. I don't need the volume or the density that he built, but that mindset and that approach can be used here on Staten Island. That's transformative, as opposed to literally going house by house that previously had a little bungalow on a 20 by 60 lot, and raising that and slightly improving the community by slightly raising and improving those folks' lot in life.
Now, do you think, was the mayor, as far as you can tell, was he receptive to this idea? I mean, I was at the press conference and he said that would be on the table, but it's clear that the recovery effort is somewhat in flux right now because they haven't done a comprehensive review, as he said. So, I mean, where do you think that?
I appreciated the fact that I had a one-on-one and a chance to make my case with the mayor, and he listened. I noticed too, and rightly so. I think from his perspective that he didn't commit to anything. He made it clear to me, though, that I should speak my mind at that press conference, and he knew that I was going to bring up acquisition for redevelopment again and again. I had literally in my hand, and you saw it that day, and I pointed to him, the notes, the notepad I took from New Orleans, and then I did a recap on the plane. And the first note was leadership and resources. The resources fight is a different fight. We could talk about it, getting the money from the federal government and then dividing the money between resiliency and housing recovery. That's a whole separate saga. But leadership has to come from the mayor himself. In my mind, we never had a mayor who did a full-throated embrace of acquisition for redevelopment. But more importantly, this mayor said he's going to be hands-on. He has to put a team together now. Brad Gare left, who I got to know and had a great deal of respect. Catherine Malin's leaving. I think Catherine contributed greatly. There needs to be, for the lack of a more creative title, like a Sandy Czar. I think you need to put resiliency and build it back in housing under one roof, one person under one deputy mayor, but with the support of an entire administration. DOT, city planning, HPD all play a role. You can't just have a handful of people who are working around the clock the way we had at the end of the Bloomberg days. I think you need an entire administration. Leadership, whether it's the New York Knicks floundering, whether it's a business or it's government, it all stems from the leadership and the leadership at the top. And this mayor needs to get a new team in place yesterday. And I made that point to him. I had some suggestions about personnel. We have a very short window because it's not 6 weeks, it's not 7 weeks of his administration and my administration, 16 months. And my constituents, and I know the folks out in the Rockaways, they've gone through hell these 16 months. And they have not perceived that sense of urgency administration-wide in a while. And that's one of the things I asked Mayor de Blasio. And from my vantage point, and I know there's been some controversy here on Staten Island amongst some of the elected officials about what was achieved and wasn't achieved. The mayor of the city of New York stood up in front of all of you, stood up in front of all of us and the people of Staten Island and said, I'm going to take a very hands-on role. I think that's a huge, an absolutely huge achievement. And we'll see where we are 4 weeks from now, 8 months, 6 months from now. But I was satisfied that he heard us. I was satisfied that he heard the message about acquisition for redevelopment, that he heard the message about the need to get enough money directed to housing recovery. It's not a shining city on a hill, it's a shining city on a bunch of pylons out there, that Seaport City. That's great, but I have people, human beings today, who don't have homes or don't have a direction yet as to where their lives are going. I want as much of these resources to go there. And I made my case to the mayor, and now it's our job to keep his feet to the fire and move this along.
I want to talk a little bit about the mayor's affordable housing plan. He's put forth an idea to create and preserve 200,000 units of affordable housing. I was reading an article in the Advance recently that you want to kind of fold in a senior housing component to that plan. Can you talk to me a little bit about that idea?
Yeah, a couple of things on that. On Staten Island, you have to understand Staten Island's history. In 2005, 2006, probably the greatest thing Michael Bloomberg did for our borough was create this growth management task force, because we were the ground zero, if you will, the center of the irrational overdevelopment that was taking place in the city. And eventually it moved to the other 3 or 4 boroughs. And it was wild to see my colleagues in the council use the same language that we were doing about tear downs and townhouse development. So in Staten Island reflexively has sort of an anti-development mindset. And when you hear about housing, the reflexive reaction is to look at it and to sort of look with a jaundiced eye about density. Unfortunately, there was it will go down in my mind in infamy, frankly, in political infamy on Staten Island. During the Republican primary for my old council seat, it was beyond unfortunate. The losing candidate stood outside the Iron State project, which is a phenomenal project, a project that's designed to get some of Staten Island's sort of empty nesters, these young, talented, upwardly mobile young people, and keep them here and create a critical mass. It's a great project. But she stood out there and she used racially tinged, if not more overt, language about affordable housing is low-income housing. And then she astonishingly said, you can Google it. It was really an awful moment in our history, because it underscored the notion that affordable housing is a bad thing. Now, affordable housing, I think, takes on a different context, frankly, in the other boroughs where they're desperate for housing. We have, again, this mindset of the overdevelopment past. And the one housing need we clearly have is for seniors. We will go from the year 2000 to the year 2030 on Staten Island from 50,000 to 100,000 people age 65 and over. We need the whole spectrum, from assisted living to independent living, from lower income subsidized to market rate housing. So when the mayor talks about affordable housing on Staten Island, I think the main thrust should be senior housing, because there's such a need. People who built this community have a right to stay here with their kids and their grandkids, stay here with their doctors, stay here with their favorite bakery. And many of them are moving to Jersey or Pennsylvania or Florida, and many of them are moving north to see their maker before we give them the opportunity. The other point on affordable housing is, when you go to communities like Midland Beach and Ocean Breeze and parts of South Beach and Newport Beach that were devastated by Sandy, and we talk about rebuilding those communities with a different and a better housing stock, those are working class folks. Those aren't affluent folks. We want to build housing that's affordable for them. And unfortunately, again, because of politics and a lot of other things, that has a negative connotation. We want to give people who have lived in these communities a chance to buy a different housing stock that's affordable to them. So it depends on what how you want to define it. So we have definitely a need for senior housing, and we definitely have a need for building a better housing stock in Sandy areas. Within that, we need to make sure that it's affordable. There are developers on Staten Island and off Staten Island that saw Sandy as a chance to come into my district, my old council district, and build Miami Beach style apartment buildings and gentrify and price out every person who lived in those communities. I don't want that. On the other extreme, quite candidly, there are these self-righteous folks who are coming into these communities, and I represented them for 15 years, and I was a staffer for 7 years before them, and I never saw these folks. And now they come in under the cloak of God, and they're going to want to colonize these areas to solve the city's homeless problem and affordable housing shortages. I don't trust them either. So I've battled for 16 months now, pushing away both extremes. I care about the people who have lived in this community for a long time. I care about giving them a housing stock so that when it doesn't, not just an historic storm, these places were underwater on a decent rain. And that's the sense of urgency I have. We have a moment in time to take the pain of the last 16 months, the loss of life that we suffered, and to honor that by extracting something that's good and long-lasting and transforming their lives. And I don't think that comes with one-offs of raising one bungalow at a time, lot by lot. I think it leads to what Vinny and I saw in New Orleans, which is ad hoc redevelopment and a crappy, maybe different than what it was, but not what it could be. And it's an image that stayed with us, and I don't want to see it happen in my home community.
Another big piece of news this week out of Staten Island was that the MTA approved the plan to give toll relief on the Verrazano Bridge to Staten Island residents. Having spent a little bit of time in Tottenville, I know that transportation issues are very, very near and dear to your residents, your constituents' heart. So tell me a little bit about this plan and how this can kind of maybe set the tone for a new way of thinking about transportation.